All right, so we're here with Pete Laybourn, a candidate for Cheyenne City Council in Ward 1. Welcome, Pete.
Glad to be here.
All right. I'm Brian Martin, and the managing editor here at the Wyoming Tribune Eagle.
I'm Sharon Fang of Black Hills Energy.
Bob Feck, Cheyenne Animal Shelter.
Again, welcome, Pete. Glad to have you. What specific issues or concerns caused you to run for the Cheyenne City Council this year?
Well, I've been concerned about our road work for a long time, and I've brought that issue up repeatedly, both as a citizen and when I was on the council. We have a massive problem here of alkali silica reactivity, which is known as concrete cancer. And you can see it in the concrete itself. It's kind of like a vein that appears and gradually weakens that concrete. And over time, you see the results around town. I'm pleased that my fellow candidates are noting this same concern. It's really been something that we need to pay attention to. And I think that the best way to do that is to seek an outside forensic consultant who will analyze those materials and those application processes, because if this is what we're going to be doing, we're never going to get the city's streets in the condition that people expect. In my neighborhood, I saw this morning that they're working again on Evans Avenue on the curb and gutter and sidewalk. Well, that was 10 years ago. That was done during my term on the council, and we had quite a discussion about it at the time. And I certainly don't want to be a Cassandra that notes the problem without a solution. I think we need to really go through those processes and determine exactly why we're having this very serious problem.
Could I follow up with that? We had someone mention that they have been on sidewalks and curbs that have been in our community since 1930 and 40, and they're still pristine. I mean, there are a couple of nicks. What do you think the difference is?
Well, I've studied it to the degree that I understand it is a chemical and a pretty serious problem. I don't believe that anybody's out there pouring bad concrete intentionally so that they have to replace it. But it became a systemic and common practice here. And actually in my neighborhood over by the cemetery, there was a fellow named W.S. Thomas, and he proudly stamped his concrete stamp in that concrete. And there is quite a bit of it that's over a century old. Downtown at the property that we own in the Valley Approach, there is W.S. Thomas, 1912. So, and that's been a downtown alley with a lot of traffic for a long time. Yet on Capitol Avenue, which is 14 years old, there's not a stamp that proudly displays who poured it, or actually placed it. Concrete's placed, not poured. But I don't have the answer. I think that we need to really dig into it. But I would say that over the time and the concerns that I've raised, there's been a cover-up of the facts.
Thank you.
Sir, and I clearly have not studied this to the extent you have, but just as a casual observer, it seems like the city may be shifting, at least on roadways, more to asphalt. Is that a misperception, or do you think they're?
Well, I think generally, yes. I think that there's been so much failure of the concrete that they're shifting to asphalt. Asphalt has issues as well. It's certainly easier to patch and replace. And that's a big factor, I think. But, the refinery or refineries in general are now refining that product more and more, and to the benefit of their bottom line. So that gunky, dark, deep asphalt that we need to hold together with the aggregate isn't the same as it used to be. So I think it's a matter of, like a lot of things, we need to look at contemporary practice, we need to look at application, and we need to really make a difference. Every year, people get upset about the potholes because over the winter, they occur. But this year, obviously, it's much more than that. And that was the testimony before the council at the budget meeting that was reported in the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. We're about 1/2 of what we need to maintain what we have. Now, to me, that's so serious, you put on the brakes and go first things first. And obviously, road work is first with me, and I believe it should be first with the community.
Pete, what qualifications do you bring to the table that you think will help you be an effective council member?
Well, I've worked on both sides of issues. I've worked for sales taxes. I've worked against sales taxes. I've run for office and won. I've run for office and lost. But I think my main qualification is the leadership I've shown on the Greater Cheyenne Greenway. That's a project that I began with a number of other volunteers 25 years ago. We saw an opportunity, we seized it, and began that effort a few blocks from here at Martin Luther King Park. And I think that I'm very pleased at the way we've developed it. In general, there are certainly imperfections, but there's a lot of wonderful parcels of property that were brought into use. There was open space that was pretty much abandoned that now has a path through it. And it's, as we like to say, free, fun, friendly. And that's a great benefit to the community and something I'm working on to this very day. I have a project at the Yellowstone Road crossing of the Greenway. We're working there to beautify that area. So I think that's my primary qualification. But I've been involved in neighborhood issues, in working with people for many years, both as a private citizen and as a council person. I think that probably, I'm sure there are some of your viewers that are remembering when I was on the council, and we had quite a lively time. I believe in accountability, and accountability means challenging the status quo. And that's really what I believe, that this is a great community and we need to maintain it and maximize those opportunities that we have, and really a lot of them, and they're wonderful. But we're coming into a budget crisis, and I think we're going to have to really be careful, involve the public, and not take on any new major initiatives that aren't absolutely necessary.
This probably leads into the next question, which is, what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the city? And then once you identify that biggest challenge, name one or two others.
Well, it's paying the city employees what they're worth. At that budget hearing a couple of weeks ago, the condition of the police department made me wonder why we didn't call a screeching halt right there and really begin to analyze that. That's the fundamental foundation of public safety. We've had an exceptional department for many years, as far back as I can remember. And that means you hire and recruit exceptional individuals, and that they create a culture that is one of respect for the public and service. And I don't think that all comes from the paycheck. But if we're not competitive in that paycheck, that's going to be have an effect that just really is unlike anything else. So I believe that, and that goes for the other employees as well. I have a lot of friends over at City Hall, and I think that they do a lot of really important work. It's a difficult job. It's somewhat like being on the council. You're not going to please everybody, and they are not. You are in a position where you kind of have to take the guff and smile, and that's not part of that is having a paycheck and a benefit package that makes it worthwhile. So I think that's a tremendous challenge, and I'm also familiar with the funding mechanisms. We're not going to go find some new pot of gold somewhere. We've got what we operate under state law, and hopefully we can increase our sales tax, but there's really no magic wand. And in that regard, I want to say that I think respect for the employees and a different attitude as far as management goes. We're all in this together. This, I'm the boss and you're the underling. Certainly, you need to have someone in authority, but there's a lot of good people and good ideas that I think can be brought forward. And so I believe that really the city runs on people, And that's a great majority of our general fund. And that's where we need to both do everything we can and show respect and consideration for those employees.
You've talked about roads, but what other issues, big issues do you see that the city faces right now?
Well, downtown is really reached a critical point. I'm a downtown property owner. I have managed property, residential property, commercial property downtown for many years, and I have worked with the Downtown Development Authority on a number of projects. I am currently a Adopt a Block sponsor of our block, of the 1700 block of Warren. But I would also have to say that I'm a critic of the Downtown Development Authority and how they have managed. The number one problem downtown, Brian, is that those departments are not coordinating like they should. We have a number of departments that really don't work together very well. The Clean and Safe program, which is has 3 employees right now and is going to have 4 before long, has been a real problem. They don't coordinate with the police department. They don't coordinate with street and alley. They don't coordinate with sanitation. And those are things that probably other people don't notice and understand. But I can tell you, we could do better. And one of the things that I really feel strongly about is the parking structure. That's really a key element. Our parking structure is just like every other parking structure. They're kind of dark. They're kind of a lot of motion going on in them. And they can be, they're there for a purpose of parking. They're not pleasant. They're never going to be. But ours also is a transportation hub. And the bus terminal, I guess you could call it, is there, the headquarters of our city bus system, which is so critical to so many people. I mean, that is such an important part of our community. And so I believe that we should take a look at those positions, not look at the Clean and Safe crew as Joe and Johnny and Bill, but look at them as positions. And when we look at them as positions, I believe that the most important thing to do would be what many communities have at their transit hubs, which is a security guard. And that is not something that you're not having a sworn police officer, but you do have someone to assist. You have someone to pay attention. You have someone to monitor the situations. And I think that would be very helpful in a lot of ways. And that is a concept I've brought forward for a number of years, but it hasn't got much traction. That's I think we need to look at what we've got and figure out if it's working as well as it can and make some adjustments. I also think that I've participated in many plans over the years downtown. I've been to the brainstorming sessions. I've participated in that, and I would have to, and there's been some great things that have happened. I mean, the depot is fantastic. That was a long sought and expensive proposition. I believe the parking structure was necessary. I think that some of that road work had to be done. I'm sorry it's failing already, but it needed to be done. But basically, you can't hit a home run every time you're up at bat. Sometimes you need to get somebody on first base, and that's been our problem. We have really tried to reach out and go for these fantastic things. Have wondered for many years and talked about it, why we don't have a water feature in our plaza. The space is there. It's ready for it. I think a plaza, particularly in a dry place like this, needs a fountain. And so, but at this point, it's incredibly premature to be planning it. There's no funding for it. We shouldn't be planning what we can't fund, and we need to work together. The trees are an issue. I am, again, working to try to bring that Main Street volunteer spirit to those trees. It really bothers me to see a tree dry up and die, and that happens all too often downtown.
Pete, please describe your vision for Cheyenne.
Well, my vision for Cheyenne is that we have a city government that reflects the people that live here. And that means friendly, that means firm, that we enforce our codes, that we have a city government that operates in an equal manner. And I think we need to be fair. I think that my vision for the community is demonstrated out on the Greenway today. That was a project that it certainly wasn't just me, but it was a number of us got together with no consultant, no big budget, and we started with our hands at Martin Luther King Park. And I want to see more of that. I think that there is a tremendous amount of wonderful spirit in this community that needs to be focused. We have an opportunity here to do what Casper does, and that is to have a Keep Cheyenne Beautiful chapter, which is part of the Keep America Beautiful program. They've had theirs for a number of years, and it really involves a lot of volunteers that are trained and experienced that can be called on in different circumstances to help the city, and particularly in green related issues, tree planting, making sure that we're taking care of our trash as best we can. So we live in a windy place, and the dirt and the trash comes blowing in, and if we can be helpful in that regard, I think that that's important. I would very much like to see that happen, but I think we need to go to our strengths, really, and understand if we want some of the things that we see our southern neighbors down in Colorado getting, we have to be a lot more thrifty. And that means a lot less reliance on consultants and a lot more common sense. And that'll be part of my campaign. I'll be talking about my understanding of common sense and other people, particularly at City Hall's understanding of common sense. We all use that terminology, but there's a lot of different meanings.
Pete, what do you think the community needs that it doesn't have, and how would you make that happen or come to fruition as a council member?
I think we need trust and respect. I think we need to have a city council that listens. And I'm very concerned about the way that we're operating now. It came into being when I was on the council. I don't believe that a consent agenda should ever be an agenda of a council meeting, that a citizen can't come down, stand up, approach the council, and discuss the issue that affects them. At the present time, a citizen can't call an item off the consent agenda. And in fact, the last time I did it as a citizen, I needed 2 sponsors ahead of time. That's one factor. I think another factor is to really emphasize and appreciate what we've got. This is really, I think, the attitude that we've got to have this new program or that new expense is unrealistic. I'd like to see, for instance, as I said earlier, I think my campaign is about maintain and maximize. I'd like to see more use of the Civic Center. I think that that's a really underused facility. It's a fantastic facility, but it needs to appeal to a broad range of citizens, and those programs need to reflect that. I think that as far as recreation goes, we're stretched pretty thin, and I don't think it's time to take on any new projects, but I think that above all else, we can't let what we have deteriorate any further.
Pete, how do you feel about the use of taxpayer money for amenities like the Children's Museum?
Well, I think that we've reached the point now where we have to pull that in. And I certainly am one who understands having a passionate interest and a desire. But I'd have to say that in today's world, we have a very competitive commercial atmosphere. And if we don't do some of the things that other communities do in terms of offering incentives, such as we can under Wyoming law, roads, sewer, we look at what what we've done in the business parks to offer incentives. I think those are the kinds of things that we need to be doing, not providing incentives to a worthy nonprofit. We need to be building business that's going to bring jobs and bring economic development, and that is something that we do pretty well considering. But it is, and there are obviously differences of projects. So, but I think overall we're in for an adjustment, and it's time we acknowledge that.
Pete, where do you stand on development or opening of access to the Belvoir Ranch? There's been talk about opening some recreational opportunities. How important is that to you, and where does it fit on your priority list?
Well, it's no priority of mine. I think that's a huge mistake, and I think it's I'm searching for a word other than ridiculous, and I can't find one. We have a fantastic state park. Kirk Gowdy State Park has all sorts of amenities. They have really expanded their mountain biking program, their facilities. It's a great recreational opportunity that's paid for by the state of Wyoming and the users. Adjacent to that, we have the Pole Mountain National Forest, which is a federal national forest, Vidavoo, and the other wooded areas out there. I recall when I was on the council when the extremely unrealistic master plan of the Belvoir Ranch came up, and it's sun-baked prairie. I think the Big Hole's a wonderful place for solitude, but there's no access to it. And I think if we can't put in the Christensen overpass in East Cheyenne to get the east side connected up to the Campstool Road, are we talking about investing money in a railroad crossing on the Belvoir Ranch? I hope someday we can get some water out of it. I'm familiar with the efforts that have gone into attempting to do that. Other than that, I think we just have to see what develops in the future. But we have recreation programs here in town, wonderful recreation programs that are going to be facing budget cuts. I think it's ridiculous to talk about the Belvoir Ranch as a recreational area.
We have a little bit more than 10 minutes. Can you talk to us about your budget and savings priorities in a time where state revenue is decreasing? What are your priorities for how the city should spend its money, and how much should it be saving?
Well, obviously savings is good, but I think we've seen in the state of Wyoming where savings has overcome development. And we have so many miles of city street. And one of the things that I'd like to see, and should be a priority, or at least a continuing effort, is bringing in the county pockets or islands that are surrounded by city property. And in East Cheyenne, that's quite a bit of that. And it is the Sunnyside Edition, where my grandmother lived, and I remember when it was semi-rural, has some real challenges. Rock Spring Street starts paved, goes to gravel, goes back to paved, goes back to gravel, and goes back to paved in, I don't know, a mile. Along that route, there's a number of parcels that could be developed into housing. That's difficult to do if you don't have the curb and gutter and the street and alley there. I think we need to look at some special improvement districts. I think that we need to be very careful about what we do, but that's a question of management. How do you balance revenue, savings, expenditures? And I can tell you that one of my big projects, which is not in Ward 1, is the Christensen Overpass. And I don't know how many people exactly understand that, but that connects the new subdivisions at Saddle Ridge across the railroad tracks to the Campstool Road area. And it's been languishing for a long time. It's a big project, but it's not impossible project. And I think when you look at growth and planning, you look at those individuals that long ago saw the need for College Drive, acquired the right of way, and made it happen. We need that further outer belt effort in that area. I am going to be meeting with some staff people from Trout Unlimited here in my longstanding campaign to improve Crow Creek. That's a project that I think we can do a lot of good on. It needs to, the Greenway needs to connect up to Warren Air Force Base and that developing area to the west of Cheyenne. And we need to follow through on commitments. I think that that's one of the things that's very important. I think that when you weaken in your effort, it shows. And we have an interest in that Greenway circling the city, and I think we should see it through. We have an interest in seeing our development occur in East Cheyenne. We need to see it through. And I think that that's part of the responsibility of the city council, is to be spark plugs and pushers. I can tell you that I absolutely do not accept the excuse, oh, it's government and it works slow. Well, our neighbors aren't working as slow as we are. And I believe that's a fundamental responsibility of the council people, is to say, hey, what's going on with that? Hey, what can we do? Can we move that forward? And that really is, that is can lead to some concern on the part of individuals in City Hall. But I think we've been operating on a mom and pop slow track for long enough.
Pete, that leads into the priorities for the next 6 penny ballot. We're likely to vote on those in May. What are your priorities? You've mentioned a couple will probably be on that list, but how would you rank your priorities?
Well, number one, of course, is the Greenway. That has been has been built with 6 penny funds, going back through 4 separate elections. We did lose the election in 2000 and had to come back in 2003 to bring the Greenway back. I'm awfully glad that we did. I was very involved in that. And I think that it's super important. I think winners finish what they start and losers dink out. And I don't want Cheyenne to be a loser. That vision of circling the city is very important. That being said, obviously I'm hearing discussion of putting road work on the 6th penny ballot, because the 5th penny is no longer fulfilling that total role. That means something else gets pushed off the other side. And so that is where we're going to really have a tough deal. I do want to say this about the Greenway. I believe it was the kind of project that specific use tax was designed for, in that it paid for the capital construction of it, and then the expenses were absorbed into the city budget. So now our 25 plus miles of Greenway are part of the city budget. They're not, I think that we're gonna need some help out of that next one, but that's what I'm saying. You need to be meeting those capital needs. And so obviously I expect Christensen Road is gonna be, the Christensen Overpass is gonna be an item that we really need to focus on. There haven't been any hearings yet or any approaches, but I understand that ballot will be probably next May of 2017. So I would hope to be on the council and be involved in that. I've been involved in those discussions and ballot preparations numerous times. And they are very unusual in that they're not structured quite like other issues. I mean, the rural communities have a big say. The county has the ultimate hammer, and the city of Cheyenne is one of those players. But when you look at our capital improvement plan, that I'm glad to see that last council finally did that. It's very important. We have tremendous needs, and frankly, they don't include a recreation center.
Just a few more minutes, Pete. What are your feelings about an anti-discrimination ordinance? Is that something the council should consider, Pat?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes up. The one that was proposed, I felt was probably premature. I've been an advocate of human rights and involved in anti-discrimination in this community for my entire lifetime. I don't believe that necessarily means that the city of Cheyenne can do justice in that area in the municipal court. That is really a big change. So I think we're going to need to have some real serious discussion. We're going to need to look at that kind of discrimination law at the present time, whether it's sex discrimination, racial discrimination, handicap discrimination. None of that's handled at the city level. And if we're going to take that on, I think we're going to need a lot of background.
So some fifth penny sales tax money and some general fund money goes to the United Way for distribution to a series of nonprofits in Cheyenne. Could you give me your thoughts on that?
Well, how are we going to help people? That's limited. I support it. In that regard, Bob, I'd like to suggest that maybe it's time we took a look at a spay and neuter ordinance here in Cheyenne to help with the overload out at the animal shelter. So those human service needs are important. I don't think that we have any excess there to cut, but I don't think we're going to be adding to it.
We're about out of time. I wanted to give you a chance to address any other issues that you'd like to talk about that we haven't talked about so far.
Well, I'd like to say that as a Cheyenne native, I'm glad I didn't join my contemporaries and move away to another place. I've been involved in rough and tumble politics here for a long time, and I got the bruises to prove it. But this is a wonderful community. I love being part of it. I know how to make things happen, and I want to see that we continue. This was a great place for my son to grow up. My neighborhood is a wonderful place, but none of that happens without maintenance and management. I think we are, it's time we got realistic about government, what it can do, what it can't do, and what we need to do. If good schools, good neighborhoods, good police department, and good city government isn't enough, I don't think bells and whistles and all sorts of extras are going to do the job. So I look forward to doing what I can to be helpful. I think I have been in the past, and I appreciate the opportunity here at the Wyoming Tribune Eagle.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate you being here.